Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. What's it like to be born deaf and to grow up not being able to properly hear what others are saying? How much help is available in Gibraltar, and how difficult is it for a deaf person to access health services when an interpreter is not available to translate into sign language? How much harder has it become now that masks have made lip reading all but impossible? Viewpoint asks these questions and more in the next hour. We're talking to the Gibraltar Hearing Issues and Tinnitus Association. Later on, we'll hear from A-level student Mia Wallace about how her deafness is making school extra challenging and about how she hopes to help other deaf people in the future. And we speak to the association's chairperson, Edgar Triai, who believes the government and the public service are failing in their obligations to serve all people in Gibraltar equally. So tonight we speak to Jacqueline Jarvis. Jacqueline was born in Gibraltar. She was born deaf. She'll tell us about her education in the UK, about her disappointment with slow progress for deaf people on the Rock, how frustrating she finds trying to access health services, and what toll it's having on her mental health. Jacqueline spoke to my colleague Jonathan Scott through an interpreter, Jill, whose services were paid for by Gita. Jonathan wore a clear mask provided by Gita to give the interviewees a chance to read his lips.
Jacqueline, Jill, thanks a lot for joining us on tonight's television programme.
That's fine.
Jacqueline, you were born deaf and then went to the UK to a specialist school. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I was born deaf, but here in Gibraltar at that time, there were no deaf schools, there was no provision to educate deaf children. There was only a specialist setting for disabled children. So in the UK, there are specialist educational settings, particularly, especially for deaf children. So around the age of 2, I was there until I was 21 actually. I went to school, then I went to college, and I studied at university. So I went all the way through the education system over there, went on courses where there was interpretation available. I got married, had a family, and then when I was around 40, decided to move back here to Gibraltar because of my family. I realised that whilst I'd been away here in Gibraltar, nothing had really changed, and it really impacted me that there were still no services, and I felt that it was really time that Gibraltar started to move forward. And so I saw that there were services for people with tinnitus and who were deaf and deafened, hard of hearing, and so looked to collaborate with them. And so with my family, it was important for me that I was able to stay here, so I think it's important that we really consider what's available. In the UK, they have deaf clubs, they have social gatherings where people can get together, share stories in their own language, sign language, share experiences, go to social events and parties. All the children can get together and sign with each other and share experiences as well. But there's courses for deaf people, there's a lot of provision. Here, there's nothing. And so I moved back around 10 years ago, and with my father, he's Joe Brigada, we met Edgar from Gita, and that was how we started to develop some of the services and the provision that's here now in Gibraltar. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of fighting still to do, a lot of work to be done, because we do not yet have the services that are required, and there is a long way to go to match the needs for people here in Gibraltar who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have tinnitus.
What would be some of the lowest hanging fruit, like the easiest things that could be done to improve the situation?
Here in Gibraltar? Well, when I moved over here, it was very, very difficult because there were no interpreters at all. There was no provision. And so I had to then rely on perhaps my father being with me or one of my older children so that I could attend appointments and understand what was being said. And it was a real struggle. I don't want to have to rely on family members. I want to be an independent woman. And some of these situations are personal and they're private, and I should have access. So it can be incredibly frustrating. We have been lobbying, and with Edgar as well. We worked to get a deaf person to come over here to Gibraltar. His name was Colin, and he was doing some training in British Sign Language for Gibraltarians, and we encouraged a number of people to attend those courses, to share information and to try to advocate for deaf people to get more information out there. And that was for around 3 years. We fought and we fought, and we got funding, and we went through some successful courses. Awareness seemed to be improving. People who had issues with their hearing started to join GITA and get involved and make themselves known. So for people who are not deaf or hard of hearing and want to make an appointment to go to the doctors or to the hospital, they'll just make a quick phone call, make an appointment, and they'll say, oh, we'll see you next week. I might have to wait maybe 3 or 4 weeks because I have to wait for an interpreter to come over from the UK. So already I have to be patient, I have to wait, and this is my health that we're talking about. So it can be really frustrating. That's a big problem here.
So for every health appointment, you now have to arrange for a BSL interpreter to come over, and the government or the health authority pays for that?
So the hospital, GHA fund interpreters. The same with school, the education system, the funding is provided for interpreters. The issue now, so for example, we have a video relay service online called Sign Video that we can use. And so there are different methods available. It's not always appropriate. One of the difficulties, for example, is you need to have these services available for wherever people need to go, whether it's people needing to go to the bank if they want to talk about their financial situation, wherever it is, it can be difficult.
If I can ask, when Jacqueline returned to Gibraltar, what did it feel like on an emotional level to see that difference in other people's ability to be able to understand what Jacqueline was saying?
That's a really good question. So in the UK, there is a lot of access. There are a lot of interpreters available. It's a very quick process. You book an interpreter, you can go to appointment straight away, and the interpreter's available for you. Through the Equality Act, people are able to have access to those services and be treated equally as their hearing peers are. When I moved over here to Gibraltar, there were no services at all and no interpreters available, and so very quickly I realised that it was a real struggle, and so we had to continue to fight. And you're talking over the years. In the first year you started, in the second year you're still fighting, and then after the 5th year, 6th year, I could feel that my mental health started to decline because of the stress and the frustration and the constant barriers that I was facing. And so I realise that you know, things are happening and things are coming, but I do have to be patient. When you're unable to communicate, when other people are unable to communicate with you, and you're trying to explain things and they do not understand, and you write things down and you're making notes back and forth, or sometimes if somebody's explaining something to me that I've missed or not understood, then they're not very patient, and they'll say, oh, it doesn't matter, and they can be quite dismissive and sort of send me away, which really can knock my confidence and self-esteem. And I think that that can have such a negative impact on deaf people and how we feel, because it limits our ability to communicate with others. Socially, there's very little that happens here, so it can become quite isolating. My children, they're with me all the time, signing. My parents are here, but I know it's quite sad, but I just really hope that in the future, that here in Gibraltar we can have, within Gita in the future, have our own establishment where we can have social events, where people can get together and have a cup of tea and a coffee and share experiences and communicate with each other. And that's what we really hope for, because that's something that even in the last 10 years has not quite happened yet. Yes, there's an office, but they need a proper space. To be honest, at the moment, I have some mental health issues myself. I've been seeing a psychologist for a little while, and it's incredibly difficult because I need to be able to communicate directly. I've been fighting for funding to be able to go to the UK to receive therapy, and that's been declined, and so it's a constant battle which can send your mental health into further decline. I've had a lot of family support, and they've really, really helped me to pull me out of some of these difficulties. I know myself I'm not 100% yet, and I still do feel stressed. And of course, with the addition of the coronavirus and face masks being used now and not being able to see people's facial expressions, and I just see eyes looking at me, it can be really quite nerve-wracking going around and seeing masked faces, and it's something that I'm not very used to, so I don't go out very much at the moment. If I try to explain to people that I'm deaf and I gesture so, and I ask them to pull their mask down, they often refuse. Some will do, but obviously we have to socially distance, and it can just make life very difficult. And so, yes, I'm very stressed. Access here is limited.
From what you've said, Jacqueline, it sounds like your treatment by the government and public services, like the health authority, has not been equal to people who do not have a hearing issue or who are not deaf. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, I very much feel that way. I think, for example, if you go to the hospital, if I have a problem and I try to liaise with somebody about it, it can take quite some time. I have to make some notes, try and explain the situation, and I have to repeat and repeat and repeat the same thing time and time again. So making notes and trying to communicate what an issue is, it never really moves forward. And so every time you see somebody, you're repeating the same information. I've had to go to the GHA lead. Apologise, I can't remember their name at the moment, but with my father we had a meeting several times trying to lobby for better access so that these appointments can go ahead the same as they do with other people. Because generally with the staff, they don't pass information on, or I've had to keep reminding people of certain things, and so I have to keep going back to try and lobby the powers that be higher up. And for me to keep doing that is stressful. My mental health is affected because it's all these additional responsibilities that I have to take on to fight for my own access. And it's just too much. It's too much. I just want provision the same as everybody else is able to have. I just think there's no real consideration of what deaf people need. So if I make an appointment, for example, and the people that are responsible for making provision of something like signed video, for example, so that I can access my appointments, they then say, oh, you don't really need it, you can lip read. And I have to then try and explain again, and then I have to wait for maybe half an hour or an hour for them to set it up, which is wasting time. And then so in this time where I'm waiting for them to set up equipment so that I can communicate an appointment, I could be at home getting on with other things that I have to do, but I'm sometimes sat there for an hour waiting. So signed video is fine, but they should be prepared when I go in and have the screen set up, have everything connected, ready, but I'll go in and they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, this connection's not working, the screen's not available, or whatever it might be, and I can feel the tension building up, and I get told to calm down. And then I just think it's me every time that has to be patient. And this happens time and time again. I have a lot of patience, but when this is happening in every single situation, they don't see the bigger picture of what I have to go through and what I have to deal with to constantly fight just to go through appointments like other people can. I went to the hospital with my daughter. She had to have an X-ray. So I asked if I could use signed video to understand what was being said, and I was told we can't use signed video because of the equipment in the X-ray room. I said, okay, that's fine, I understand, but could you just please move your mask down and stand back a little bit so that we can communicate? And they point blank refused. And so how then, as a mother, am I able to communicate in those situations? So I started to make notes and write things down, and I was told that we can't do that. So every solution that I'm offering other people to be able to communicate with me, they are declining. And so, you know, when I'm at appointments and they say, well, we have to deal with other patients, I'm thinking, I'm a patient too. So why am I having to wait this amount of time to have an appointment that other people don't? So they just don't understand that I'm treated in such a different manner to other people. So communication is so important. You know, I'm a mother, I want to know what's going on with my daughter, I want to know information from those appointments, and so it's incredibly frustrating. And so to have to write things down, it can be quite time consuming, and constantly having to sort out problems on their behalf. I just feel like I'm invisible. So I'm told, oh, you must be patient because I've got other people to deal with, but where's the people dealing with me? So I feel like I'm not being treated the same. And if I go to, say, the tax office or to Government House or wherever I need to go to, again, people are unable to understand me, and so they deal with other people that they know well and that they can communicate with, and they don't take the time to communicate with me. And so I then have to rely on my father to support me and to lobby for greater access, and that's not fair. I should be treated the same as everybody else.
Jackie, it sounds like you were already subjected to considerable difficulty before the coronavirus when trying to access health services, but you've made a few references to masks. So recent months have been particularly stressful for you. Is that correct?
It is correct, yes, definitely.
Could you maybe give us a direct message for somebody who's watching, who might be in the health service or might be working in another area of the public service, or even a shop that you might go to. Could you give us a direct message for that person to try and help them understand what they can do to be able to communicate with you, or make communication with you easier?
So there are 3 things that I would recommend that people can do. One is to remove their face mask. If they're wearing a mask, maybe wear one with a clear window. I do still find it difficult with those because when they're talking, sometimes you can't see through quite clearly because there can be reflection of the light, for example. So that can be one problematic nature of the masks with a clear window. Also, sometimes they steam up. So a bit like a car window, a windscreen will steam up. The masks can do the same, and then unfortunately I have to let them know that I still am unable to read their lips or to see their facial expressions. I think for other people, if they have maybe some hearing, if they wear hearing aids, for example, and that can aid their communication, they might be more suitable. But for myself and my husband, we really struggle with the clear masks even. So I think it's other people's responsibility to think about the different offices and think about the different arrangements that need to be made here within Gibraltar and how those people can communicate with each other to consider that if appointments are being made, what will work. So it's automatically flagged up on the system, this person is deaf, they need such and such a requirement, whether that be an interpreter or otherwise, and that it automatically happens. It should be the service's responsibility rather than me constantly having to communicate and make arrangements with these individual departments. That is really quite a lot for somebody to take on, whereas the services themselves could have that provision set up. In the UK, that's how it's done. Here, it's not, and that is something that I would really like to see happen. Now, with the masks and the issues over the coronavirus, the 111 telephone service to the NHS for somebody to know whether they ought to self-isolate, for example, we're unable to do that. And so my son has to make that telephone call, which I'm not comfortable with because one, he's a teenager and it's not the kind of thing that he really wants to do, and it can generate family arguments, but we would like to do it ourselves. We've been told that we can't access that through text, we can't do it through email, and so these systems need to be amended so that they're accessible for deaf people, where we can receive a text or an email. So for example, if we have to go and do a coronavirus test, we're told that you need to make a telephone call or you need to hear a message, and so again I'm reliant on family members to do that for me. And this is personal information sometimes as well that you do not want other people to listen into. You want to be informed directly. And so that kind of situation with 111, for example, that's probably going to be a common issue, particularly at the moment. Being told that I do not need an interpreter and that my children can interpret for me is not acceptable. I think that people do not realise that it can really affect my children as well as me. It's not appropriate. They're young. They've got their own childhood issues to deal with. They do not need to be interpreting for parents. It's not okay, and it can really affect the children. So I think one of the biggest things is please make arrangements for interpreters, for sign language users. Make sure that you're supporting patients to provide what's needed. Don't leave it to me to do all the work. It's not my job. I'm not being paid for it. And it can be really difficult. It can really weigh people down when we're trying to communicate not just at the hospital, not just at the doctors, but at school, but at the tax office, but wherever it might be. And it's too much. I'm constantly doing family work as well as all this. I'm tired. And with my own health as well, the added stress is something that's not needed, and I think now is the time that we must look for support for the provision that is needed.
It sounds like there's been a lack of empathy in some instances for what it feels like to not be treated equal, and to think that it's okay to have to, as you say, use your children to interpret for you. Is that a fair way to characterize it? A failure of empathy?
Yeah, I think yes, a lack of empathy, also a lack of duty of care. If people have a disability, for example, they get support. So if you can see somebody has a visible disability, people seem to have empathy and they provide support. But if somebody's deaf and they can't see it, and they sort of look at you and you go, oh yeah, you're okay, but actually it's my ears that don't work, you know, they don't see it, and so they think, oh, they've got bad attitude. And actually communication is such a major thing, and that is what we need people to do to help us, to think about communication, to think about access, so that we are the same as everybody else. So yeah, I do think it is an issue.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us, Jacqueline?
One thing in relation to masks, when people pull them down, whether that's in a shop or elsewhere, I think that they're concerned about perhaps being fined for doing so. And so I think we need to raise awareness that if somebody is deaf and needs to communicate, that's not going to happen. So I think that people aren't aware that if somebody's deaf, that there's a reason that the mask needs to be pulled down for communication. And so I think that needs to be raised. It's a concern of mine, because I think that deaf people can suffer further because people are anxious about removing the mask, but it can make me more anxious, and it's quite scary just looking at people's eyes.
You've mentioned stress and anxiety quite a few times in the interview, so maybe just to summarize your feelings in that respect, and how they have been worsened by the coronavirus pandemic.
So in the past, I've perhaps been a little stressed, and this is, pre-pandemic, but the use of masks has definitely made the issue worse. I feel that I've been quite depressed, quite stressed, and the lack of access has really made me just feel so tired and worn out. I feel like I don't want to go out at the moment. I want to stay at home, just because I just feel that once more I'm going to have to fight. Once more I'm going to have to argue for somebody to do something to enable me to communicate. And I need help. I need people to make sure that can happen. The coronavirus has added those pressures. And I feel like the old Jackie has disappeared at the moment. I feel like I would like to get back to being the old me. I feel like I'm a different person. I'm not a happy person at the moment. So I'm being very down. Sometimes I've been quite upset in an evening, and I've seen in the UK that there are a number of deaf people there also who have died by suicide because of the additional pressures and the mental health decline. So I feel like we have been brushed aside and marginalised, and we're at the bottom of the pile, and that's a big thing. And I don't think people really realise how much work goes in to trying to campaign for deaf people to have access to communication, to have a good life on par with hearing people. And so that's what I hope in the future that can happen. And I hope that Gita can find suitable premises in the future. I hope that they're provided with a place where we can have social life, where we can mix with others, we can share our stories, we can talk about our emotions, share the issues and the factors that are affecting us all, and I think that will be a really big help in safeguarding deaf people's mental health here in Gibraltar.
The stress and anxiety that you've spoken about, a lot of us can relate to that in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that access to timely information when things are moving so quickly has been extra important. But you haven't had that equal access to information as
No.
it's been disseminated.
That's right. There's been nothing. So, for example, hearing people, they will have timely information. They'll know exactly what they can and can't do, what the rules and regulations are, and I'm completely oblivious. I've not been made aware of those at all. So it's a real challenge because you don't know what the rules and regulations are. On the television in Gibraltar, on the news, I very rarely watch it. There are no subtitles, there's no interpreter on there, and so I don't understand what they're saying. There's no point in me watching it. If I can look on the there is an option to look on your phone with subtitles, but with my eyesight the way that it is, it can be quite problematic, and so I would like it to be on the television, have the updates that are accessible so that I know how many cases there are, whether there are changes to regulations, what the updated news is. Every now and again I might get a text message from, say, my father who will say, oh, this has changed or that has changed, but that's it. I'm not getting the same information as everybody else. And if my father was not there, how would I be getting that information? And so that's why Gibraltar must make sure that we have subtitles, that we have interpreters. And it doesn't matter if, say, there are, maybe only 1 or 10 or 20 people who are deaf in Gibraltar. They need access to that information.
Welcome back to Viewpoints. Tonight we're looking at what it's like to be born deaf in Gibraltar and to grow up not being able to hear properly what others are saying. We're going to hear from the Gibraltar Hearing Issues and Tinnitus Association chairperson shortly. First though, we speak to A-level student Mia Wallace about how her deafness is making school extra challenging and about how she hopes to use her studies in the coming years to position herself to help other deaf people in the future. My colleague Jonathan Scott spoke to Mia.
Thanks a lot for talking to us. Tell us a little bit about your hearing issues and when they started.
So I was born deaf. I have moderate to severe hearing loss, and I wear 2 hearing aids, and I cope quite well with them, but I do miss a lot.
If somebody's talking to you and like I am now, albeit with a mask, hopefully, because it's clear, do you look at my lips to try and understand fully what I'm
I
saying?
rely a lot on lip reading. Yeah.
So COVID-19 has made things harder for you to understand others?
Yeah, but I've been quite lucky that I've got friends who are aware of it, and they try their best to like communicate and like overcome that barrier. And as well in school, like I've been quite lucky that teachers as well have like been very aware and made sure that they can like communicate with me.
So what can they do to make it to make themselves understood better to you?
Well, I don't know, because they don't really wear masks in school.
They don't, okay.
No, so.
But sometimes are they looking away when they're talking, or?
I guess, yeah, like if the back is faced towards me, I will miss stuff, and like I can't point out what I missed because I wouldn't realise until like maybe later on, where like I go back to do a piece of work and I'm like, I don't understand it, and it's probably because I've missed something. And I guess that could have an impact overall, which is where like I feel like we need a teacher of the deaf in Gibraltar, because I can help myself with the knowledge I have, and teachers can help me with the knowledge they have, but they're not specialised in how to help deaf people specifically. And I feel like as a student, it's already stressful with all the work that we have, like that I need that guidance from someone who specialises in deaf people, like to help me do the best I can, because right now I don't feel like I'm doing the best I could be doing, and I feel like there is potential there, but I haven't been able to access what I need in order to achieve that.
Any student would have difficulty learning something new about English and biology, the subjects that you're taking at A-level, but you've got an extra level of difficulty in trying to access the communication that the schools are giving all other students. It would be different if you were in the UK. You'd have that support.
Yeah, I feel like in the UK they have teachers for the deaf, which is someone who would guide the teachers and also the student on how to access like information and like overcome the barriers, and we don't have one here, and I really feel like that's impacted me, because like I don't know how I can help myself to like get all the information and stuff like that.
From what you understand, what extra support would you have in the UK?
So in the UK, like they would have a teacher of the deaf which would guide the students and teachers on how to make learning more accessible for people with any type of hearing loss. And not only that, they would also have the knowledge on like the technology used in schools, because like if there's a problem like now, I don't know what to do like to fix it, and like teachers obviously don't know how to fix it, so like then it's just kind of like left like that we have to call in the technical people to fix it, and that could take a while, so that means I'm left without my technology that I use in class. Like could be like weeks or months, and that has happened previously.
Let me ask you two things then. What is the technology that you use in class?
So at the moment I'm using like a loop system, and it's basically like I wear like a loop around my neck, and the teacher wears a microphone and it connects, so then I hear it straight to my hearing aids, and that makes like that focuses on the teacher's voice, so then I hear more, and like it blocks out a bit of a background noise and stuff like that.
Am I right in thinking that you found primary school maybe easier to cope with because there was more visual work, whereas now there's less visual work?
Yeah, in primary school I was in top set for everything because everything was a lot more visual. But as the work has been more like listening and that, like throughout the years I've just dropped down like groups because I don't catch everything the teacher says and I don't realise, and like if you miss a piece of information that might affect like the topics later on, and then like it just, things don't make sense, so you can't like piece it all together, so that has an overall effect on like the subject and like grades. So yeah, like I've just dropped down the groups throughout.
That doesn't sound fair.
No, because basically I got an assessment done when I was smaller in primary school. I scored average for a lot of things, and like a few things were below average, but because my scores weren't below average, like not enough of them, they refused to give me the help because the scores didn't back up the fact that I needed it. But now looking back, I obviously did, because if I'd gone from top group and then just dropped down the groups into secondary school, then I should have been given that help before, so I didn't have to drop down the groups. And my mum even said that this would happen, and it did.
And how do you feel about that?
Frustrated, because I've had to struggle throughout education because I didn't get the help, so I was equal to everyone else. Like I feel like I've been a bit disadvantaged because I do miss things in class, like I won't hear everything, and that's unfair because people who are hearing will hear that, but I won't.
Do you think that there could be more emphasis placed on visual material and aids to what is being taught in school, at A level even?
I think it would be quite hard because A level is a lot of content, and like it's just facts that you have to remember. So like I can just look at the book and study, but I miss out on like the classroom discussions, and like I will hear some but I will miss some, and because I spend a lot of energy trying to listen in class, I don't actually retain the information, so I will go home and forget everything that we've said in class.
How difficult has COVID-19 been for you, the recent months, with more people wearing masks?
Maybe like a few months ago I was worried about how I would communicate with people, because if I go to bars and restaurants I usually depend on my friend to tell me what the waiter said and stuff like that. Or like if we go into a shop and I need to ask a question, I usually just ask my friend to do it at the moment, because I know I won't be able to hear what they've said. And like I've been lucky that my friends have been really patient with me and they've like helped me, but it could be more accessible. Like I shouldn't always have to rely on my friends to tell me what they've said.
What would your hopes be for things that could change to make things better for you and for people in a similar situation?
I would definitely hope they put a teacher for the deaf in place, because I don't want other students to have to go through the struggle I did, because it's very frustrating and like it does have an impact on you, because you just want to do the best you can, but you just have that barrier there that you just, yeah, that you just can't pass. Whereas if you had a teacher of a deaf, they could advise you and like guide you into the right places and get the right help. And so I'd really hope that would be in place.
And are you thinking of going to university?
Yeah.
And is that a factor, the support that the university has in place?
Yeah, I'm hoping that when I go to university, I will get the help I need, and I would do research before I go to make sure they offer.
What are you thinking of doing?
I'm thinking of doing psychology and counselling, and then doing like BSL on the side, so then I can become someone who can communicate with other deaf people, so to make counselling more accessible.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And have you got an idea of how easy or difficult it'll be to learn BSL?
So I've learnt it before, but I've forgotten it. I think I could pick it up quite quick because I've already learnt it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Excellent. Well, we wish you every success
Thank you.
in doing that. Thanks a lot for talking to us, Mia.
Thank you.
Very brave of you to open up. Edgar, thanks a lot for arranging today's interviews and also for arranging for Jill to be here, to be able to help us communicate with Jacqueline properly. The matter of hearing issues in Gibraltar is one that you've been campaigning on and working in for a long time. How did it start for you?
Well, I got involved in this area when I started experiencing tinnitus as a result of noise-induced damage in a concert. I was devastated. I couldn't cope. The health services really failed me then, and I had to do my own homework. And I was searching the internet. I was introduced with the British Tinnitus Association, and I felt that reading their stories that really there was a need for awareness, and I had in mind of basically setting up a tinnitus support group then. But in my journey, I came across another lady. Her name is Tony Gomez. She was doing her own journey with sudden hearing loss that appeared for her, and also the lack of services and provisions. And we just decided to join forces and create a broader support group that basically the group turned to just also an awareness group and a pressure group at the same time. So it's quite broad what we do.
For somebody who's not aware, what is tinnitus and how do you experience it?
All right, okay. Well, tinnitus is a symptom, and people experience it for different reasons. Like I always compare it with sneezing. You can sneeze because you got an allergy or because you got a cold. Tinnitus is the same thing. It's a sound that is perceived internally. Some people can actually say, oh, I hear it from my left side or from my right side. Others, they just hear it inside their head. And the sound itself can differ from very insect-like to very mechanical, electrical-like. And it can be as a result of high blood pressure. It could be as a result of ear damage or nerve damage. It can happen to anyone at any stage in life for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. How much has COVID-19 impacted people with hearing issues and tinnitus?
Well, you've heard their stories. It has impacted them really bad. Having hearing loss, deafness, profoundly deaf, hard of hearing, if you don't have the empathy, the empathy is not given to you, and you are misunderstood and ridiculed at times, because everybody gets finds when you get the wrong end of the stick funny. And I know, but the constant ridicule of this dismissiveness, oh, I'll tell you later, and you never get to hear it, that wears the person down, their confidence goes down. And before COVID, if they were not in a very good state of mind and mental health. They had, they were depressed or they were down with COVID and wearing masks. That totally creates the barrier to them actually understanding the person talking to them, puts them in a darker place. And unfortunately, there is no counseling, there's no service. The mental health strategy in Gibraltar is not geared for people who suffer hearing loss, and especially with people with tinnitus. During the COVID lockdown, I actually got in contact with the British Student Association contact that I had. They referred me somebody who did counseling for tinnitus sufferers in Birmingham, and I created a WhatsApp group and invited people that I already knew had something tinnitus, or they have come to me saying, look, my tinnitus has gone really bad since lockdown. I need help. Sometimes I'm worried I'm going to do something wrong, I'm very low. And I created that WhatsApp group to basically fill the void that the health services at the moment are not filling up. And that's basically, I would say, a personal frustration that I have, that I've been at this lobbying since 2009. I brought Professor Langus, who said that Gibraltar could be a model for treatment and therapy for tinnitus. He provided his expertise and his contacts, availability to set up a multidisciplinary health. You need an ENT, GP, audiologist, everyone working together to assist these individuals that some of them can cope by themselves, but there's a lot who can't and they need guidance. And 10 years have gone by and we're still in the same place as in the past. We just are forgotten.
That's how you feel? You feel that people with hearing issues are forgotten?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking on for the tinnitus side of things, but I feel that people with hearing issues, and that's a broad term because they are so distinct. They've got things in common, but it's very distinct. And I feel that they are not cared for. They're not taken seriously. It's because I would say, the inability to hear is invisible. They actually question how disabling it is for that person. And what you've got to think is that hearing loss is not a learning disability. Hearing loss is just the lack or difficulty in communicating. It's a communication issue. So it can be remedied. And people like Mia and other students, because they got hearing loss doesn't mean that they cannot achieve the full potential. There have to be things in place to make them be able to achieve their full potential.
How much harder has it been not being able to follow the regular updates as easily? So the daily briefings, the news bulletins, how has that impacted you?
I personally, fortunately, I can hear those briefings, but my membership and basically the hearing loss community in Gibraltar, they've been basically outcast and have suffered a great deal. It's fortunately you see countries where in America where you've got signing there, and you see in the UK where you don't have signing available, but they do have subtitles, and in Gibraltar we lack both. And government, after our lobbying, basically issued to remedy the situation basically the script that they had in mind for that particular day. But that script only included whatever the deputy or the chief minister would be talking. So if they had invited Dr. Rawal or the commissioner of police, that script wasn't handed us for us to distribute. So the deaf community didn't get to know what was said by them. And my lobbying has always been that it's on the ownership of the broadcaster and on government being the people funding the broadcaster to make it available for them to provide a full service for the full audience. I know that some senior citizens might not be technologically minded, they might rely on GBC for their local news, not on Twitter or Facebook. So they wouldn't get the full message because there is no subtitles for them.
It's been a really interesting morning, Edgar. Thank you for organising it. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us? Maybe like a one thought, even if it's something you've already said, like the most important thing for somebody watching this program, the most important idea for them to understand.
The big message I want to put out there is that the hearing loss community, for all the wrongs that happened in the past, we have been silent and patient, but now together we got a voice. We want a change. The time for change is now. And the reason why we want to change is not because we expect people's charity, it's because we demand our right to be treated and to benefit as any other Gibraltarian British citizen in Gibraltar. We don't ask for anything more. The cost might be more, but that comes under the obligation of the government to our constitutional rights. If it's more expensive, well be it, but we shouldn't be paying the price with a poor quality of life, with lack of information, with depression, anxiety. We shouldn't be the one paying the price.
The Gibraltar Hearing Issues and Tinnitus Association's chairperson, Edgar Triay, believes the government and the public service are failing in their obligations to serve all people in Gibraltar equally. What do you think? Join the conversation online. Viewpoint will be back at the same time next week. Jonathan Scott will be here. He'll be sitting down for an extended live interview with Together Gibraltar leader Marlene Hassan Naon. From the team at Broadcasting House, thanks for watching and good night.